And in this session here, we want to sort of keep that global focus on the many other countries where people stand up for democratic rights. And many of these leaders also sit among us today. So I'm delighted about that, how many were able to join us here. But let me first turn to our first panelist, Leopoldo. As I said, for you, this is not an academic exercise. This is your life. Leopoldo, what is needed for democracy activists like you to succeed, in your case in Venezuela, but also in other countries?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be here, to be sharing with this great panel. There are many things that we need, all activists, and I would like to say hello to all of the activists that are here today. We need many things, but I think we first need to stage where we are now. We are at a global conflict that has become very clear, that is autocracy versus democracy. We've been talking about this for some time now, but it all changed after the invasion of Ukraine, and it became very clear that that was the dominant struggle facing the world today. And we go beyond just seeing that there is an autocracy-democracy conflict. We have seen, and we in Venezuela have lived, the consequences of a network of autocracies. The mighty powers that are autocratic, China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, in our case in Venezuela, Cuba, they work together. They articulate with each other. They have the capacity to support each other in many different ways, financially, militarily, using intelligence, diplomatically, and even creating an entire new sanctioned economy ecosystem. And they also support each other in repression mechanisms and in the way they treat their political prisoners. So we have seen that. We are not talking about a conspiracy theory, but that is true. And then when we look to the other side, there is a lack of organization of freedom and pro-democracy movements. And I was very shocked after I escaped Venezuela a year and a half ago to come out and to realize that we had very little contact with our peers from Cuba and Nicaragua to talk about our continent, and even less communication with the people who are fighting the same fight in Belarus, in Hong Kong, in Cambodia, in Zimbabwe, in Burma, in China, in Russia. And it became very clear that the first thing we need to do is to articulate an alliance of these pro-democracy and freedom movements. An alliance that has the capacity to learn from each other, to support each other, but also to understand that we are in the middle of a fight. Many times our countries, Venezuela, Belarus, Iran, are thought out in the global context as if the regimes means the people, and it's not that. The people of Venezuela want freedom, the people of Iran want freedom, the people of Hong Kong want freedom, of Nicaragua and Cuba. So I believe that in a stage like this, where we're talking about global democracy, we need to understand the need to support these pro-democracy and freedom movements. And I am absolutely certain that things really changed after the invasion to Ukraine, and we are now in a different paradigm. We are in a paradigm where we need to go beyond the concepts that were embedded after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when it was everything about supporting civil society, and supporting civil society to strengthen the capacity of the society for the time when democracy was going to come, as if democracy was going to happen by inertia. But now we know that it's not like that, that things are going to happen, that we need to have the capacity to fight for freedom. And I want to underline this adjective, fight for freedom, because that's what we have gone through. This is what our lives have been by. I went to prison for 7 years, but I'm one of thousands. I have buried my friends. Many of us are in exile. And when I talk to my friends from Hong Kong, from Belarus, from Nicaragua, from Cuba, we see the same struggle. So we need to articulate the attitude of those people within each one of these autocratic regimes that want to organize themselves, that want to take the risks, and that want to learn from each other in order to promote a global freedom and pro-democracy movement. I want to tell you that I'm... Thank you. I'll end here.
No, go on. That was just applause.
Stop on your head.
Go on, Leopoldo.
No, I just want to tell you this. I've spent the last months talking to a lot of my colleagues. Some of them are here in this audience, many are not. And I can tell you that this view of the need to articulate a strong and effective network of leaders and movements from around the world is something we all want. But we can't fight this fight alone. We need organizations, institutions that have the capacity to help. So I think that we can come out with the idea of the need for a network of leaders and movements from autocratic regimes, and also the network of organizations like the ones are represented in this panel today that are capable of supporting in the most effective ways these pro-democracy and freedom movements. And finally, I am optimistic. I believe that we can promote a fourth wave of democratization in the world, but we need to believe that that is possible to happen. If we don't believe, if we're not convinced that that is where the world should go and that where we should put our efforts, it's not going to happen. Because autocrats believe that they are going to win the fight, that they are going to take over the world by crumbling and attacking liberal democracy, as they do, as we heard this morning, through disinformation, cyber attacks, crushing the freedom movements. It was very clear. February the 4th, Xi Jinping and Putin signed a letter where they specifically said that they will join efforts to crush colored revolutions around the world. So it's very clear that they fear colored revolutions, meaning freedom movements. So if that's what autocrats fear, I think we need to understand these movements better, give them more support, and have the capacity for them to promote actual transition to democracy. And transition to democracy requires numbers in two battlefields, the streets and the vote. So when we have the capacity to vote, we need to have the majority to push for change through the ballot. But when that opportunity is not there, we also need to have the capacity to mobilize large numbers of people to the streets in order to protest and show face against autocrats in their territory. And I know that the attitude of millions of people around the world is aligned with this hunger for freedom. Thank you.
We're not even just talking about supporting people on the ground, but also, so I would really love your thoughts on this.
Well, the first thing is to recognize that that is happening. It's happening with Hong Kong. It's happening with Iran. My good friend Masih Alegni from Iran, she lives in Brooklyn, New York, and she received information from the FBI that there was a plot to kidnap her in Brooklyn, take her to Venezuela, and then to Iran. And that's another example of how these autocracies are working together. So we are, in a way, all under threat, but that needs to be part of our motivation in the sense that if we get scared of autocracies, and I can tell I was in prison for 7 years, 4 of them in solitary confinement in a military prison in Venezuela. And the most important strength is the conviction that you are on the right side of history, that you're doing the right thing, and that you don't need to be scared of autocrats. And I know that's difficult to say, but I insist on having the right attitude in order to have the possibility of winning this fight, because there are many reasons why people would throw the towel and say, I won't do it anymore. I've seen many people simply say that they got tired or they got flipped by the dictatorship, but we need that core leadership that has the commitment and is willing to take all the risks, because it is risky to face autocracies. And I'll give you just something that has happened over the past 48 hours. 5 years ago, Neomar Lander was shot and killed in the middle of protests in Venezuela. He was shot in his chest, 17-year-old young Venezuelan protesting for freedom. 2 days ago, some of his colleagues, young people, many of them didn't even know him, they went to protest, and they were there in the same place, and 10 kids got arrested. And now 5, as we speak, 5 Venezuelan young leaders are being processed by the injustice system of Venezuela. But I'm telling you the story because when I spoke with their families and when I heard what they told the people outside, they said, continue the fight, we're not scared. continue the fight, continue to show face against the dictatorship. And these are the type of movements that we need to promote inside autocracies, because we can face the situation where countries say, well, it's simply impossible to reach freedom in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, in Hong Kong, in Cambodia, and many other places. But if we appeal to the people, as you were saying, I mean, democracies have been on recession, but the need for democracy has been augmenting. Mm-hmm. So, and what that means is that autocracies have been getting more and more terrain, but the people want to be supported. So I'll share with you some very concrete ideas that I think we can put together. First, I think before the end of the year, we need to bring together leaders and movements from countries that are facing autocracies, just to know each other, to meet, and to have a common way forward. Second, I think we need to put out a plan that is shared among different organizations to promote and strengthen grassroots activism. And we know many of the people that are in this room that can be done massively, effectively, and it can have an impact. Three, that we put together an anti-kleptocracy networks. These autocratic networks are not ideological, are not political, are kleptocratic. They are supporting each other because they're part of the same corrupt ecosystem. And there is great evidence about this. The people from Russia, the opposition from Russia, they've been doing a very good job at dismantling all of the corruption of Putin. But we need to bring together the networks of those who are doing that in Russia, in Belarus, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, because it's part of the same network. Then, fourth, we need to engage what was talked here this morning, which is a narrative battle. I mean, the narrative issue, disinformation, is, in all cases, a battlefield. And I am sure that the people who are here, who are activists as well, can relate to the fact that we are put against a wall and they shoot us with no possibility to defend ourselves. They can post 3 million Twitter messages or Facebook messages, and we have the capacity of posting 1,000 or 1,500. The social media of 8 years ago is not the same social media that we're facing today. At least I'm talking about autocratic environments. There is complete censorship, no radio, no TV, and the social media is completely manipulated and yes, by the regimes, with the support of Russia particularly. And finally, to figure out ways in which the support, the financial, economic, resource support can be more effective, more transparent, and more decentralized. And there are many things that can be done through new technologies in order to make that happen. So those are some ideas that I would like to share with you in order to promote an agenda for this democratization wave that we all need to be engaged. But the most important thing, we need to believe that this is something that can be successful, and we need to understand that on the other side we have autocracies that want to crush what we believe is the end goal of any society, which is to have a democracy that respects the rule of law, human rights, and free and fair elections.
Thank you, Leopoldo. I mean, I'm an optimist by nature, but being on a panel with you makes you even more optimistic about everything, and even with everything that you've sort of gone through. And I think that's so important. Like earlier today, we had Alexei Navalny's handwritten notice from prison, and it of course all came out as a poly sort of Twitter thread, but I wanted sort of where we showed it earlier. These are handwritten notes from inside a prison that he's handed to a lawyer, and this is the way it came out to this conference. So I think it's important to really keep underlining these sort of lived experiences.